Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
It is looming ever closer, and arguably the journey down the rabbit hole is becoming ever more baffling. Do you remember yesterday, if you were kind enough to pay even the vaguest iota of attention to my burblings yesterday, you may have heard me quote the journalist Nick Cohen on something he has dubbed paranoid populism. It is this bizarre mindset in which anything that you are presented with that contradicts your opinion must be bogus. So you end up rejecting facts, you end up rejecting statistics, observable evidence, the evidence of your own eyes, and not only that, but you end up considering anybody who's providing you with this evidence to be, well, deeply dodgy. And it's a few lines. I'll dig them out again. I'll remind you of them more accurately in a moment. But it really came home to roost this morning when I got into work and I started looking through the field work of this poll that we've undertaken at LBC. Started looking through some of the questions. It's pretty scary, I've got to tell you. Among Leave voters, and I'll dig out the numbers among Remain as well, but among Leave voters, the number of people who think things like the MI5 is working with the UK government to try and stop Britain leaving the EU, MI5, 28% of Leave voters think that's probably true. I don't want anyone to feel picked on today. 16% think of Remain voters think it's probably true. Among the don't knows, who increasingly seem to be in danger of becoming the most sensible people in this whole cat fight, it's 10%. But the number that it really fascinated me most, in response to this question, it is likely that the EU referendum will be rigged. 46% of people intending to vote Leave said yes. They said it was probably true. Probably true. The number plummets to 11% among Remain voters. But that's still significant. That's still 1 in 10, pretty much. That's 10% of people planning to vote Remain who think that the vote will probably be rigged. Now, there's a little bit of wriggle room here, because you could really argue over what the words, how the words have been interpreted. What do they mean by rigged? Do they really mean illegal corruption after the ballot boxes have been sealed, or do they mean rigged in the sense of propaganda being unfairly employed? You can see that there's a little bit of room for analysis. I know what the intention of the question was, but rigged is quite a broad church. I want to, for the purposes of our first conversation this morning, and I have a sneaking suspicion at 6 minutes after 10 that we won't talk about anything else now, breaking news notwithstanding, we won't really talk together about anything else until until the vote is underway. And on Thursday we can't talk about it. Until then we won't talk about anything else after. Come Thursday morning, when the box is open, when the ballot's open, we can't talk about it at all. We must talk about anything else. So we'll see. I mean, it's partly up to you, isn't it? If the phones don't ring, we'll have to find something else to talk about. But my sense at the moment, very much, is that this is, if not the biggest, if not the only, then indubitably the very, very biggest story in town. I have had a lot of fun in recent months with what we decided to dub my box of trolls. This is full of people on social media who I'm afraid I have neither the patience nor the inclination to engage with anymore, but who continue to bombard all of my inboxes in the studio, my personal Twitter account. Everywhere you go, the LBC Facebook page is particularly pungent. And they are, it could be fairly said, people who almost certainly fit into this category. In fact, if you're not genuinely convinced that this vote is going to be rigged, unless of course Leave wins, presumably, I don't know whether we did a follow-up question, presumably if we vote to leave, if we come out of the EU as a result of this referendum, will these people still think it's rigged, or is it only rigged if you don't get the result that you hope for? I would say, judging by my box of trolls, people who, I mean, really reply to almost every single utterance I make in the most, it's quite incredible. Go and have a look if you want. I presume if you get what you want, then it won't have been rigged. Is that right? And this, I think, for the rest of us, and that would be just under 80% of the country. This is where I think we really, really lose the plot. I cannot begin to conceive of a mindset that says, if the result doesn't go the way that I want, then it must be corrupt. Then it must be dishonest. How do you even end up in that place? Now, I want to try today to examine this question without necessarily either of us being unnecessarily rude, but surely to suggest that Britain, Great Britain, the United Kingdom, would practice the sort of electoral deceit and manipulation routinely seen in North Korea, or inspired and undertaken by Vladimir Putin's Kremlin, surely that is a point at which we just can pause and go, okay, everybody relax now. We have truly crossed a Rubicon of ridiculousness. It won't be rigged. It can't be rigged. The systems, the institutions we have in place mean that even if people do attempt to manipulate ballots at a local level, which I suppose conceivably could be done, we would find out. To manipulate a ballot like this at a national level it's beyond the wit of man. How anyone could seriously subscribe to that school of thought. And do you know, the phone lines are open, by the way, 0345 606 0973. So I'm just talking, you can join in. The question is pretty obvious, isn't it? It's how the hell could anybody in Britain think they live in a system similar to North Korea? 82% of newspaper coverage is coming down on the side of leave the European Union, and yet 46% of people persuaded to vote that way think there'll be a rig. It would be rigged if we went the other way. Wow. I guess if you are buying into the notion that it's rigged, you're top of my list this morning, 0345 606 0973. What do you say if you win? What do you say if we vote to leave? Do you still say it's rigged? Peter's been in touch to suggest they will probably say we won despite it being rigged. And 46%, one poll, I know, but if you sort of round that up, that's half of the leave vote. That's pretty much, depending on what poll you look at, that's arguably a quarter of the country who think they live in North Korea. And the question I really want answered is, how do you think this has happened? How has this happened? And weirdly, I'll tell you something that occurred to me this morning. I don't know how many of my programs you were kind enough to listen to during the junior doctors coverage, but I remember one caller ringing in and arguing that all doctors are awful and all government ministers are brilliant. And I've just pointed out on this occasion, because I've got a bit of a catchphrase when it comes to strikes: if you support every strike, you're stupid. If you oppose every single strike, you're even stupider. You've got to take a view on each and every one. It's amazing how few of us actually do that. It's a strike. Here's my view. Don't need to know details. But the doctors was different, wasn't it? The doctors' strike, the junior doctors' industrial action, saw people actually employ their brains for a change before deciding which side of the argument they supported. And this guy rang in and he told me how awful doctors are and why they don't deserve any support or protection. I said, well, on this occasion, public support does seem to be on their side. And he said, no, it isn't. I said, no, it really is. I mean, the numbers are inarguable and they're shifting constantly. And he said, well, everyone I've spoken to is against the doctors. And it didn't really register with me at the time. Everyone, I think I probably laughed. You probably did as well. Everyone I've spoken to. And I thought back to that this morning, and I just had an image of a bloke in a pub, right, who starts banging on about the European Union or the doctors' strike. And everyone else in the pub, let's say 80% of people sort of shuffle away and try and continue their conversation somewhere else in the corner. And 10% of people sort of nod along, go, yeah, that's right, mate, yeah, that's right. Anyway, did you see the game last night? And then 10% of people possibly go, yes, I actually happen to agree with you. And if that was you, 80% of people are sort of drifting away from you because you're boring for England. 10% of people are just nodding along in the hope that you'll shut up soon and change the subject. And 10% of people might agree with you. You come out of that pub convinced that everyone agrees with you. It's like the definition of an echo chamber. And look, regardless of what side of the debate you're on, we can all agree that people who bang on about the European Union, I mean, to be fair, that is not something you encounter. It's part of the problem with the whole debate, is there's very little passion on the Remain side. There's an incredible amount of passion on the Leave side, but when you read that half of them think that it's going to be rigged, you realise that the line between passion and delusion has never been thinner. 46% think it's going to be rigged. So, here we go. How has Britain, has it become, I want to say become, I'm still quite young and optimistic, maybe we've always been like this, how have we become so bonkers? How have we actually allowed a curious conspiracy of self-serving media, self-serving politicians, excuse me, whatever else you want to put on that list, how have we become a country which has begun to resemble Italy when they imprisoned Galileo Galilei for proving that the Earth revolved around the sun and not the other way around? How have we actually become a country that appears to contain 26% of people, adult voters, who are the modern equivalent of believing that the Earth is flat? Here is a claim that is right up there in political terms with heliocentrism and flat earthism. I believe the vote is rigged. And I have to tell you, it looks like the very first caller is going to say that suspicions will arise if we vote to remain. So I hope I'm not doing Les a disservice. We'll speak to him first after the travel news. The idea is, if I don't get the result that I want, then the vote must have been rigged. I don't think I can find, 10% of people on the Remain side, I suppose 11% are supposed to subscribe to this school of thought. In many ways, I'll go on and I'll say it, I think it's going to be quite easy to find people on the Leave side to make this argument. I'm more interested in speaking to people on the Remain side, because presumably you're exactly the same. You're just a mirror image, a reflection, if you like, of each other. Phone lines are full. My apologies for that, in a sense, if you're trying to get through and failing. I'll crack on after the travel news. We'll rattle through as many as we can. But remember, today is the penultimate opportunity we have to talk together about this issue. So do not be surprised if when the chips are down, it turns out that today and tomorrow we don't really talk about anything else. If you've got an angle you want to explore, examine, or you want us to look into, we've still got time. We've got sort of 5 hours and 45 minutes left together before all bets are off. And I'll do whatever you want in that time. Seriously, make any suggestion you want. You know how to get in touch. If the result doesn't go the way that I want, I will conclude with absolute confidence that the result has been rigged. 46% of people intending to vote Leave have responded to an LBC survey in the affirmative. I think that statement is probably true. Wow. Your thoughts? Les is in Bexley Heath. Les, take it away.
Good morning, James.
Hello.
I'm truly grateful for taking my call and giving me a voice, and applauding you to air this on your show, because as many people, I've been following it very, very closely in the media and the press, etc. And to my knowledge, you're the first one to raise this issue. So that
Well, we only published the poll this morning.
Right. Yeah, but I've not heard anybody else raise this subject.
No, well, I don't imagine most people thought it was a subject to raise. That's the interesting thing about it. People really believe this stuff.
Well, even though you may not, and probably all the ones that members of the 46% you'll think are conspiracy nuts, it's always a great pleasure to cross swords with you, and I haven't done it recently, but I'll try and do it this morning.
So you think it's rigged? You think the vote's rigged?
No. What I was about to say, James, is if we remain in, okay, then I've got great suspicions that it has been rigged, or something untoward has been done. And let me just, if I may,
you may, and you will. Just to clarify, if we vote to leave, it's all above board and kosher, right?
Yeah. No. If we actually exit, yes.
So if we vote to leave, no suspicions whatsoever. If we vote to remain, rigged.
No, if we stay in.
That's what remain means.
Yeah. I'd like to, first of all, I'm of a certain age. I actually remember and voted not to join the EU. And all I will say,
was
James,
that rigged?
Sorry? Let me finish.
I will. Okay, go on.
for 10 years afterwards, I kid you not, there was not one single person I could find from all walks of life in this country that actually said they voted to join the EU. Now, you can draw your own conclusions.
Well, Margaret Thatcher did.
Well, yeah, but what surprises me...
Well, why are you laughing? She's from a walk of life. She's fairly prominent. Margaret Thatcher voted in 75. She campaigned to go in.
Well, right, okay, fine.
She's quite a good example. I was trying to think of someone that might be friendly to your position, and I can't think of anyone friendlier, really. So you didn't ask her personally, obviously, but you were aware of the fact that she campaigned. I was 3 at the time, so you'll forgive me for not having 2020 recall.
Sure.
But Richard Bryars campaigned as well. I've seen pictures of him.
Yeah. But all I'm saying, James, is, you can only speak from experience, and for 10 years after, maybe longer, I've still never ever found one single person that voted to join. But what amazes me with an intelligent chap like yourself, and I'm not patronising you because you are.
I don't think, with greatest respect, Les, I don't think you could patronise me.
Okay, I find it a little bit strange that you're so anti that it could be rigged when we're talking about billions and billions of pounds, a vested interest from a lot of very, very rich people to remain.
Yeah, I hear you, but in many ways, I guess you've undermined your second point with your first point. So you don't, just to clarify, you do accept that some people did vote to join the European Union, you just weren't able to find any for 10 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if we vote to leave, there's no suspicion whatsoever, no rigging at all?
If we actually leave.
Yeah.
Which I've got my doubts.
Yeah, I bet you have. What about moon landings? Where do you stand on them?
And who killed President Kennedy?
Well, seriously, just on the moon landings, not on President Kennedy. Where are you on the moon landings?
Well, let's say it's an interesting theory from those that say that no one ever did land on the moon.
Yeah.
It's an interesting theory,
okay.
which I remain.
I mean, so there we are. I mean, first caller in. I absolutely get the result that I want. It's all been above board and kosher. Get a result that I don't want. Must be corrupt. Must be rigged. I wonder if we've picked the wrong topic this morning, Les. There's nothing, is there, that I could say, show you. I mean, you mentioned you couldn't find anyone who voted to join the EU. I mentioned Margaret Thatcher. You carried on telling me that you couldn't find any. I mean, there is no chink in the armour of what some people would call your paranoid delusion and what some people would call your certainty. There's absolutely no way you would, if we voted to remain, accept that it had just been a vote.
Okay, James, one
question, Les. That was all. It's just a question. Can you think of anything that might persuade you that the democratic process in this country is superior to that of North Korea?
Yeah, if somebody actually showed me, which is the question I was going to ask you, maybe you can answer this, who is actually going to be responsible for the counting of the votes?
Well, the same people that are responsible for the counting of the votes at every single election that you've been alive for.
Would that be the government?
No, it wouldn't be the government.
Who is it?
The Electoral Commission, the Electoral Commissioner in charge of. I mean, shouldn't you know that before you conclude that it's definitely going to be rigged? Why are you asking me?
Well,
you've rung in convinced that it's rigged, and you don't even know how it works.
No, I never said I'm convinced it's rigged.
No, you're right. You will be convinced it's rigged if the vote goes the way you don't want. Well, I'll tell you what I'll do, Les. I will applaud you for your honesty, and I will not laugh at you. It's 24 minutes after 10. Brian is in South Shields. Brian, we're down the rabbit hole. Are you the March Hare, or are you Alice?
I'm just a simple guy with a simple opinion.
Go on.
I love this country. Whether we're in or we're out, it's my vote. That's that.
Yes. Same here. Actually, that's a pretty neat reflection of my position as well, Brian.
Yeah. But I did say to your researcher, I don't think that exit was ever on the table. I think I know you say it like that. I have my reasons. There are things I would say to you that are my own personal opinion, but it's not PC to say, so I'm not going to do that. All I will say is if we were to take the government at its word, and that if we leave the EU, it's doom and gloom, and we're going to have money's going to go, and we're going to close this, and we're going to close that, and you can't have your pancakes on a Tuesday, and all the various different things that happen. As a government's first responsibility is to protect the people, I can't believe they would ever allow that to happen. And there's just something in the back.
But that's different. That would be a vote to leave being followed by a sort of renegotiation or a second bite of the cherry, something that would enrage a lot of people. But that's not the same as claiming that it's rigged. You should. I mean, it's 1-0 to the riggers.
I don't think it was ever on the table.
I don't understand what you mean. So there's no way on Friday that the vote will be to leave. You just don't think it's going to be allowed to happen, which means you think it's rigged.
At all.
Well, then you must think it's rigged.
Well, to me, rigged would mean that there was an intent to change the votes as people came in.
Well, you're saying it's not going to be allowed to happen is an intent to change the votes of people.
In fact, you know what? You're absolutely right. I think my terminology is wrong there. I don't believe that if we were to put ourselves in the level of danger that our government is to say we would be in, that their first responsibility would allow that to happen in the first place. And therefore, on that basis, I have to think that
fair enough.
It wasn't going to happen. I speak to a lot of different people. All the guys I work with, we work for a company that has come out recently and said we really, we're not going to take a side, but we want you to vote in. We had a business brief that said we're not going to take a side, but we want you to remain in.
That's your employer telling you what they think will be best for their company, and not necessarily, therefore, for you. But that's the inference, isn't it? Yeah. Ford did the same yesterday, didn't they? To tens of thousands of people. Yeah. JCB have done it from the other side. The bloke who runs JCB, albeit that he did get a big fine from the EU for breaching some competition laws, but he did it as well. So we're going with rigged. We're going with, if it doesn't go the way you want it to. Well, actually, you haven't told me whether you want to remain or leave. Actually, you just think it will be rigged.
I'm an Exeter.
Okay. So we're looking for that elusive Remainer who subscribes to. I'm going to call it a delusion, Brian, but we're not going to fall out, all right? Because either you are deluded or I live in North Korea. And I prefer the idea of you being a bit deluded, mate. I think that's fair enough. It's not too rude. 28 minutes after 10 is the time. Does that mean, Brian, every election that goes the way you don't want was rigged, or just this one?
No, I think it's very much dependent upon the outcome that's going to be. This isn't like the general election. This is completely different. But just what you were saying there, my brother, he supports Remain, but he lives in America. He lives in the US. He's been there for 5 years. He cast his vote for Remain, and we have fantastic conversations.
Of course. Oh, well, this was the point of yesterday's show. Yes. Go on.
I love now. We get on great now, mainly because we're in a different country, but we do get on great now.
No, I hear you, and that's why I'm so glad. And actually, I don't use this word very often. I'm quite proud of the way the programme went yesterday, when we finally identified the real victims of this whole nasty, horrible business, which is the people on the side of leaving who don't subscribe to the xenophobia or the racism that has come to typify much of the campaign. I got some really quite emotional responses from people after my little defence of their position, who felt that their voices had been completely ignored. It's partly my bad that I thought that was being covered. I thought we had that covered on LBC, but apparently we didn't. So we've been doing the xenophobia side of it, and we're doing the anti-xenophobia side of it. But the people who are pro-leave, who find the racism just as repellent as people on the Remain side do, have felt very, very excluded from this debate. So we did that yesterday. Today's slightly different. Rigging. Actual rigging. So that's what Vladimir Putin does. That's what Kim Jong-un does. 46% of people poised to leave, including our first two callers, Les and Brian, think that's what we do as well. And that, I think, when people talk about politicians being out of touch or commentators being out of touch, how can you be in touch with a mindset that says, yeah, our system pretty much North Korea, Russia, David Cameron, Vladimir Putin, interchangeable, Kim Jong-un, Nick Clegg, peas in a pod. How can you be in touch with that? So what do they say? What do they mean when they say you've got to address these valid concerns? If you're talking about people who genuinely think that our electoral system, unless of course, that's why Les was so charming in his way, unless of course it goes the way they want, in which case it definitely wasn't rigged at all. And I want a Remainer. Where is this elusive 11% of people who want to Remain who also think it's probably rigged? To rig an actual vote, to tamper with ballot papers, to throw away boxes, to, I don't know, what, somehow invade the minds of voters using special rays as they walk into the voting booth before putting their cross down, to rub out all the pencil marks and replace them with different votes. 46% of Leave voters think that is going to happen. Or at least, I would say, from the first two we've spoken to, they think that is definitely what will have happened in the event of the vote going the other way. And I'm not going to pretend today that I find that anything other than absolutely baffling. I don't even find it. It's certainly not angering. I find it funny, but not in the context of such an important vote. And I tell you what I feel, and this is going to really wind you up, and I'm sorry. I feel really sorry for these guys, and presumably girls. Really, really sorry. I mean, because there's nothing that can help you. Even if you get the vote you want, then give it a week, when suddenly they haven't planted magic money trees in your garden and built a big wall around the Isle of Wight, whatever it is that you think is going to happen. You're still going to be subscribing to this school of thought. It's astonishing, absolutely astonishing to learn today that you live in a parliamentary democracy where a significant swathe of the population thinks that it's all being run secretly from a big bunker underneath Whitehall, and they will rig the vote. What is going on? 0345 660 60973. It's gone a bit fundamentalist, hasn't it? When you see a statistic like this. In the interest of balance, I have to invite Remainers who also think that the vote will be rigged to come on. Our research today, and Theo Usherwood will talk us through some of the detail in a moment, suggests that 11% of people poised to vote Remain will exist. So come on, 0345 606 0973. Simon is in Basingstoke. Simon, what would you like to say?
I'm surprised you're not more bothered by this, James.
Well, I am bothered by it, but there's not a lot I can do about it.
Well,
except talk to these people.
Well, I find it disturbing that it's such a large number, because it really says a lot about what faith or lack of faith people have in our own democracy, and I find that very frightening.
I do.
But one thing I would say to you is, I'm a Brexiter, but I don't believe they'll be stuffing ballot boxes or anything like that for the Remain campaign, because I think there are too many honest people in this country.
That's the point, isn't it? That's the point with all conspiracies, is it involves too many people. Someone did an equation recently where you could look at the moon landings, the JFK assassination, the Twin Towers attack, and it's the number of people who would have to be complicit that determines how likely it is that there has been a conspiracy.
Well, I think there was a good phrase by, I think it might have been Winston Churchill, that is something along the lines of "Don't suspect conspiracy where incompetence will."
Yeah, that too. I'll go with that as well. Actually, go on. What was the
one thing I would say, James, is, and it's not to do with the Leave campaign or the referendum, but it is. I was quite shocked by Michael Crick's reports on Channel 4 about the level that the Tories went to in the last election of breaking electoral spending rules, because it was so egregious.
I think we're going to find that the Tories were far from alone on that. Actually, I think those Crick's already moving in that direction. But remember that they are allegations at the moment, and investigations are underway. Speaking of Michael Crick, he got banned from a Vote Leave rally the other day. He got excluded.
Really? Well,
yeah.
I think Michael Crick's politics are fairly obvious, but he's not afraid to investigate anyone, and I think that's what a journalist's role is. And I don't know why
they didn't let him in. I think they claimed it was full, but he was definitely told he couldn't go in by an aide called Robert Oxley.
Can I ask you one more question, James, though?
You can, although you must bear in mind my impartiality is scrupulous.
I just wonder, do you at any time feel uncomfortable supporting Remain when you...
I don't support Remain.
Tony Blair and, whatever your view.
This is no. I'll pick you up on that very briefly, because a lot of people seem to have laboured under this illusion. I am passionately opposed to racism and xenophobia, and I argue against it on an almost daily basis. Some people who are not opposed to xenophobia and racism that believe that means I must be on the opposite side to them in all arguments. But I don't know if you listened to the introduction to yesterday's show. The introduction to yesterday's show. Let me just describe it. How can I describe it? As illustrative and illuminating, if you are interested in what my concerns are. The idea that by being a passionate opponent of racist politics, race hate, xenophobia, and the sort of hate that Jo Cox's husband described as the thing she fought all against all of her life, that does not mean you have to be on one side or the other in the referendum debate. It's a terrible slur and stain upon our country that people have been able to turn it into that. If you hate racists, you must be Remain. If you are racist, you must be Leave. I reject that completely and entirely. So I don't know if that undermines the premise of your question, Simon, but you're free to ask it.
No, it doesn't, James. And I applaud you for that, and I take the same view. The best time in my life when I was at university meeting foreign students for the first time, and it was a wonderful experience. And I think this country it has a good history of not being racist. And that's the one thing I would really hate to see changed. But what my concern with those who want to remain, and I'll exclude you from that list, is when you have organisations like Goldman Sachs and people like Tony Blair wanting you to remain in an organisation, that would automatically make me question that organisation's validity and honesty. And that's
I think you may have got that the wrong way around. It would make you question the cause. If it's got supporters like that, it would make you think that the cause must be wrong.
Well, it makes me question whose interest that organisation.
I have no argument with that. I think we're all doing that, aren't we? I mean, in whose interest is this choice, that choice? You're trying to find someone who is impartial, who is genuinely objective. It's very, very, very hard to do. I have a favourite in this field. I've mentioned it a few times. I found Martin Lewis's analysis incredibly compelling. He's been voted twice in completely open votes to be the man most trusted by the British public. The chap, you know who I mean, Simon.
Yeah.
I mean, the money saving expert. He
Oh, him.
Yeah, he's been genuinely a judge, and he's brought it down to how risk averse or risk friendly you are. And his analysis, which I've tweeted a few times from my account, has been absolutely brilliant. But he does come down. He does make a decision, which means, of course, that many people will think that it's biased, because well, anyone who doesn't like his decision will think that it's biased, and lots of people who do like it will think that it isn't, and never the twain shall meet. Simon, thank you for keeping it friendly as well. Mike is in Chelsea. Mike, what's going on?
Hi, James.
Hello, mate.
My name's Mike, and I'm a conspiracy theorist.
Carry on, Michael. That's very
Yeah, well, basically, I just wanted to put my input. I work in cyber security now, and I've done for 5 or 6 years professionally. But before that, I was a 16-year-old researcher online, having a look at things like viruses, never doing anything nefarious, but looking at that type of stuff. And back then, I think you think your door's going to get kicked in by government agencies every 5 minutes.
Yes.
You think Big Brother's watching you, etc. And as I've grown up and I've met people in politics and I've talked to the House of Lords and met people in media, you start to realise that there's not this huge us and them, and actually a lot of politicians are just people. And I think that's the problem. If you read everything that you're kind of looking at online, and you don't know people in that industry, and you don't know people that are the decision makers of the country,
and you don't realise, and this has been a grave disappointment to me as I have grown older and been on a similar journey to you, Mike. I used to look at politicians and think that I was a child and that they were grown-ups. Do you know what I mean? That they were doing things I was too young and ill-informed to. And as I've got older and I've met more and more of them, that they are just as unimpressive, just as flawed, just as fallible, and in many cases just as ridiculous as the rest of us are.
Exactly, that's it. And what I found working in cybersecurity is actually people who work with specific government agencies that I've now trained with, but not in a professional capacity, but just at training centres and whatever, you realise actually they're similar people to you in the sense that they're probably into the same kind of stuff, they've got the same kind of interests and hobbies, etc. And they're not these kind of government drones that are sitting there waiting to...
Well, how could you keep it quiet? I mean, if they really hadn't landed on the moon, would you not have found one person involved to come forward and say so? If they really... if the Twin Towers really had been blown up by Mossad or by... I don't know, Dr. Spock, Mr. Spock out of Star Trek, would somebody involved in such a massive conspiracy not have come forward and blown the bloody doors off? Of course they would, but that is the point. If you live in an echo chamber, do you think social media has made this an even bigger problem than it used to be?
I think it adds fuel to it, doesn't it? So the way that conspiracy theories can run, like for example, I saw not in the Orlando shootings, but one before where somebody was saying that witnesses were government agents that were actors, and some stuff that just absolutely isn't feasible. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that all governments are squeaky clean, but at the same time, I don't think they're doing worldwide cover-ups of this and that. I don't think the Earth's flat, etc. I think you have to put a bit of logic into it and reasonable doubt.
But when you heard Les, the first caller, and you know, fair play to the fella, he didn't dress it up. If the vote doesn't go the way that I want, I will be convinced that it's rigged. If it does go the way that I want, I'll be confident that it wasn't.
Yeah, how can you possibly say that?
Where does logic? How do you put?
You've either got faith in the system or you haven't, and
but he has got faith in the system whenever it does what he wants it to do.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is actually, for me, this is a fulcrum point in all of the conversations we've had about this referendum and related issues, and indeed my box of trolls, which I'm not going to look in today, because I suppose in some ways I'm inviting them to ring in. The idea is very, very simple. If the world doesn't roll in the way that I want, then there must be sinister, dark, secret forces making sure it's rolling in the other direction. And that is true in North Korea. And for 46% of people poised to vote leave, it's true here too. Quick word for Mark, who's been in touch to say a survey of LBC listeners regarding the Leave Remain vote and whether it's rigged is in no way representative of the wider population. I can't be bothered to explain the obvious. What's more, I'm pretty sure you know it is in no way representative of the wider population. It was a poll of the wider population, Mark. It was not a poll of LBC listeners. It's not one of those silly ones we put on the website where it goes, click here to cast your vote, and we end up with 98% of people saying Nigel Farage is going to be the next Pope. And then they all tweet it to each other saying, you see, mainstream media, this is a proper poll. We paid for it, and it's been done by professionals. It's not just, if you're a bit bored and you haven't got a great deal going on in your life, come and have a click. This is a proper poll. Theo Usherwood will talk us through a little more of the findings it's thrown up after this.
James O'Brien on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
10:49 is the time. They laughed when our political editor Theo Usherwood asked if we could put a question on this opinion poll about how many voters believe the vote will be rigged on Thursday. And, well, I'd like to say they're not laughing now, but a lot of people probably are, Theo. But my goodness me, it was certainly a question worth asking.
Yes, it was. I just want to run you through from the top, because there are a couple of other elements to this. And let's just start. There was a question, it was actually YouGov's suggestion. The BBC and ITN are not commissioning an exit poll in order to allow the vote to be fixed without anyone telling. Probably true, 15%, probably false, 44, and don't know, 41. That is 1 in 7 people think that the BBC and ITN are not holding an exit poll, so that would allow somehow for the vote to be fixed. We also then asked about MI5, this intelligence service, whether it's working with the UK government to try and stop Britain leaving the European Union. 21%, that's 1 in 5, think that statement is probably true. 40%, 4 in 10, don't think that that's true, and then about the same number again, don't have an opinion, don't know. And then is it likely that the EU referendum will be rigged? Probably true, 28%, probably false, 45, and don't know, 26. So that's more than 1 in 4 voters think that the referendum is rigged. What's really interesting, though, is when you start to look at the particular numbers, start to delve beneath those headline figures. Would you like to have a guess, hazard a guess, James, as to which political party of the main 4 political parties is more has a greater tendency towards conspiracy theories than the others?
Is it the monster raving loony party, Theo?
No, it's not.
Oh.
It's UKIP. But you're just nodding there. Yes. On the whether MI5 is working with the UK government to stop Britain leaving the EU, 30% of UKIP voters think that statement's probably true. On whether the EU referendum will be rigged, 64% of UKIP voters from our poll, and it's a proper poll, as you said, a weighted sample right across the makeup of the British public. 64% think that the referendum.
Because we can't do follow-up questions, which is why in a way we're doing them now. And obviously probably going to add to the rage. But what happens if we vote to leave? Which a lot of informed observers still think might happen.
I don't know. Maybe they'll think that this shows.
Does that prove everything's right?
Because this
or would it
show
just be there were
called them
so
out?
many, or they'll think it was 80-20 and it's come out as 55-45, and they've massaged it? Or
I'm going to make a quick point as to why this might be happening, but just quickly on the figures, because there's an interesting one just on social grade. You have in, economists use it, ABC 1s and C2 DEs, the two different sort of grade, social economic grades that are often used by advertisers to sort of mark people out. The C2 DE grade, a lot more conspiracy theories amongst that group. 35% think the vote will be rigged. 25%, 1 in 4 believing MI5 will be involved. In terms of regions, the South is quite has a tendency towards conspiracy theories. But the question as to why this is happening, there is actually. I was speaking to somebody who's very knowledgeable in this, and I asked them to help me out why this might be happening.
You said that almost as if it made a contrast with the person you're speaking to now.
No, I'm making a contrast with myself. That I went to help me out, Adam Bienkov at politics.co.uk, who's sort of done a bit on this and was helpful. And he was making the point to me just in a conversation that it's because there is this anti-establishment feeling that is fed by Nigel Farage, fed by the UKIP leadership, and not only them,
but Corbyn as well. Corbyn's supporters are anti it, yeah.
And also Michael Gove and Boris Johnson. When we heard, Michael Gove,
Old-Etonian former member of the Bullingdon Club, leaving assault upon the last bastions of the establishment.
Lord Chancellor in his...
What does that mean, anti-establishment? Because I wonder increasingly whether it means anti-reality.
It's anti-establishment in that their main pitch to people, and we heard it with Boris Johnson, their pitch to people is for the working man, the working woman, why don't you stick it to the likes of George Soros? Why don't you stick it to the likes of all those economic experts like the Bank of England Governor Mark Carney, like George Osborne, the Chancellor, like David Cameron, the Prime Minister? This is your chance for the working man to have their say and their voice to be heard over the establishment, quote unquote. And of course, that's really these figures aren't, I don't think, are a coincidence. I don't think you can separate these figures from the message, the overall message that's not only coming out, as you say, from Jeremy Corbyn and Nigel Farage, but also from the main campaign, the main Vote Leave campaign. And it ties into what's happening in America as well with Donald Trump and the so-called truthers.
Yes, and it's why yesterday's show got such a remarkable response from people who are keen to leave the European Union but who reject some of the tactics and some of the memes that you've just described with just as much passion and just as much dignity and integrity as people on the Remain side. So I mean, just to clarify, because Mark was troubled that this was somehow a self-selecting survey like one of our sort of online clickathons. This is, I mean, YouGov, proper outfit, as well respected as you can get amongst the pollsters. They had a very good outing at the mayoral elections. They got it spot on. So I should look at that again as well. So 64% of self-declared UKIP voters already believe it will be rigged, while simultaneously believing that they're going to win.
Yeah, and I'd also make the final point, James, and I was speaking to Nigel Farage in his office in Brussels at the time of the renegotiation, and this referendum is seen by people who aren't necessarily connected with Europe and what have you as a standalone vote. Nigel Farage, for him, it's a little bit like Lord of the Rings. It's a trilogy. There was the campaign to get the referendum. There is the campaign to win the referendum, and then there is a campaign to secure Britain leaving the European Union. And of course, that's very separate, because when you listen to people like Boris Johnson, he didn't actually say today, I want to leave the European Union. What Boris Johnson actually said when he was in conversation with Nick Ferrari is what's going to happen is that we're going to vote to leave, then David Cameron can go back to Brussels and secure a better deal.
Is this Flexit?
This is a sort of a second referendum. Yes. We can either have a vote on a second referendum,
that's going to disappoint everybody.
But Boris...
It's not the worst. I know you're right, but you're sort of dealing with what actual politics looks like rather than binary referenda.
And I just make the point very quickly that there are people in UKIP who are very angry that Nigel Farage wasn't selected as the designated sort of campaign leader. His campaign wasn't selected, and they don't actually trust Boris Johnson. They don't actually trust Michael Gove to secure what Nigel Farage wants in terms of the absolute. Britain leaving the European Union, cutting all ties.
Theo Usherwood, many thanks indeed. Even more numbers there, and it's difficult, isn't it? Because obviously I have history with UKIP since Mr. Farage challenged me so successfully to come into the studio and prove that he wasn't a racist liar. It went so well he got dragged out of the studio by his own communications person so that they could make it stop. But that number, even if I'd never heard of the party or the person, 64% of people subscribing to a certain political movement in this country think that the vote will be rigged. That means they think they live in North Korea. That means not that just that they're completely deluded, but they've been so... how do you tell the difference between someone who has been appallingly let down by society and someone who just has to believe all of these sort of things because otherwise it might be their fault that they are where they are? I don't know how you tell the difference. It's like trying to find out the difference. It's like trying to distinguish between the liar, the seller of lies, and the believer of lies. We shouldn't hate on the believers of lies. We shouldn't hate on people who have been led to believe things that are simply and demonstrably not true. We're locking people up 300 years ago for proving that the Earth revolved around the sun. It was not that long ago that people were convinced the Earth was flat. Look at unprovable religion and the power that's exerted over people over generation, over millennia. But how do you tell the difference between the snake oil salesman and the snake oil customer? And on this single issue, I think we can... Do you know what I would have said yesterday? I think we can almost all agree that we don't live in a country where a national ballot could be rigged. Okay, we are not perfect. There was a case in Tower Hamlets not too long ago which involved not electoral fraud as such, but well, not vote rigging as such, but electoral fraud in the sense that the man who won the mayoralty had administered grants from his sort of personal judgment that went to people described in court as his cronies. There was also calls on television stations supported by him that if you didn't vote in a certain way you would be going against your religion. So that was Lutfur Rahman was his name. He was the first person since the 19th century to be found guilty of the misdeed of unlawful religious influence. So look, I mean, the system is open to some forms of abuse, but to be open to a nationwide fixing or rigging of the vote, to buy into that is to buy into, I mean, absolute down the rabbit hole rationales. And yet, a significant swathe of the population does. I guess I want to move on to the why now, rather than the do you. The phone lines are groaning under the weight of all the people keen to contribute. I still hold out for a Remainer who also thinks it will be rigged. 03456060973 is the number you need. It's coming up to 11 o'clock. That hour flew by. I suspect the other two will as well. And I suspect also you'll agree with me when I say there's not really any appetite to discuss anything else this morning. I'll leave you for the time being with a thought from Incorrigible FCA on Twitter. In a tweet to Mr. James O.B., he simply writes, as the results of this poll sink in, I am genuinely frightened to leave the house. It's 11 o'clock. More of this after this. And you are listening to LBC, where we concern ourselves with our own opinion poll for once. Not so much on voting intentions, but what lies behind the voting intentions and what breaks down on questions. Weirdly, it's not the question we thought we'd be focusing on today, but it's the question that jumps out from the statistics like a yapping dog. Is it likely that the EU referendum will be rigged? 46% of people intending to vote Leave replied that's probably true. And 11%, I think we found one, of people intending to vote Remain found it was probably true. Break it down according to party, and you have 64% of UKIP voters who think they live in a country where North Korean style or Kremlin style ballot rigging is probably happening, probably going on. 4 minutes after 11 is the time. 03456060973. And the reason why this isn't funny is because once you establish that mindset in people, I mean, where does that go? What have we got if we haven't got our democracy? Do you see what I mean? Sometimes I know you think I exaggerate my fears of the slow creep, the slipper-clad creep of fascism in this country. Always happens. I could not imagine the planets being better aligned. Economic crisis, refugee crisis. Right people in the right places at the right times. The slipper creep of fascism. If you've got a significant swathe of support that doesn't just reject the status quo, but actually rejects reality, you empower them to do whatever the hell they want. So, well, we can't trust democracy, we can't trust ballots, we can't trust votes. Okay, let's not have any. If you can't trust votes, if votes are rigged, if ballots are fixed, 46% of Leave voters think this one will be. Well, then why bother having a ballot? Let's just put our man in charge and let him do whatever the hell he wants. You see, I'm not going mad, am I? If you can convince people, persuade people, or simply find people who believe that parliamentary democracy in this country is fraudulent and corrupt, you're halfway down the road to getting rid of it. That's why it's frightening. That's why it's not funny. 03456060973 is the number you need. Catherine is in Suffolk. Catherine, what would you like to say?
Hi, it's lovely. I hope you're well. It's beautiful weather here.
Carry on.
We're very lucky in this country to have this thing called a democracy. However, I also think that you're not taking on board the fact that this EU vote is actually an advisory vote. So that needs to be kind of taken on board.
I am. I mean, just to clarify what the question was, very simply,
please.
it is likely that the EU referendum will be rigged. So it's not about what happens afterwards, it's not about what happens before, it's about what happens during the referendum on Thursday.
Well, I think that this process whereby the Electoral Commission do take the votes in and count them should certainly be made more transparent.
Well, they do it in public.
Why. Yes, why not?
They do.
Well, but where?
Well, you know, on television on the night of elections, where you see all those people in rooms with big piles of votes
coming up.
Yes.
But that in itself is just something that's on television with all little.
No, there are people in the room as well. There are official observers and representatives from all parties.
Counted the vote.
That's why, and that's why you can call for a recount if it looks really close, and you can see the piles growing and the piles.
There are lots and lots of places where all manner of votes can disappear. I heard from this man who was doing a postal vote, wherein he was requested to fold his ballot slip in a certain way, such that his number could be seen through the window, but there was no way that he could fold his piece of paper in order to make that happen.
Okay, who was it? I mean, is this evidence of? I don't. You were sold to me, Catherine, I have to be honest. You were sold to me as a Remainer who believes in conspiracy theory, believes in rigging.
Yes, I do believe in it. I mean, you yourself summed it up most perfectly when, the proposition was made that the Earth revolved around the sun. You know, that was a conspiracy theory in its day, wasn't it?
No, it was a scientifically observable fact.
No, that's
Galileo looked through a telescope.
But that you see, things remain as conspiracy.
Which had only recently been invented by Copernicus. And the Earth always had revolved around the sun, even when
he was in fact hounded, wasn't he?
Yes, because
and supporters of that were hounded and were called conspiracy theorists.
Well, they weren't called conspiracy theorists; they were called heretics.
That view conflicted with the state.
They were called
heretics. We have a view in this country that we have a democracy, and anybody who says, "Well, hang on a minute," is considered a conspiracy theorist. You yourself brought up the World Trade Center debacle, but yet you haven't mentioned the third building that fell due to office fires.
Okay.
Now, that's quite interesting.
I'm sure it is, but I think we'll wait to find out just how interesting it is for another day, Catherine. Just to be clear, where do you think the rigging takes place?
I believe that vote rigging takes place, yes.
No, but where? How do they do it?
Have you heard of the Freemasons?
No, what are they?
You have never heard of the Freemasons?
No.
Well, I can't believe that you can be there talking with any degree of authority on conspiracy theory without any cognizance of Freemasons.
Who are the Freemasons? Are they a band?
The Freemasons are a secret society which inhabits...
Oh, well, that's why I haven't heard of them.
...the belly of London.
That's why I haven't heard of them, because they're secret.
Sorry?
That's why I haven't heard of them, because they're so secret.
No, they're really not that secret.
But you just said they were a secret society.
Well, they consider their dealings. Did
they do the third tower? Did they do the third tower?
Sorry?
Did they blow up the third tower?
Well, I think that's a stupid question.
Sorry.
I absolutely refuse to dignify that with an
Fair enough. Did they kill Tupac?
Who the hell is Tupac?
I can't believe you're having a conversation about conspiracy theories and you're not cognizant of Tupac Shakur's assassination.
I'm sorry, now you're starting to ridicule me, which is absolutely the way that people go when
I know.
see something.
When you claim that the Freemasons rigged the vote for the... Catherine, I'm afraid I'm going to make a stand on principle here and say it's not my fault that you're getting ridiculed.
No, it is you that's doing the ridiculing.
Absolutely, but it's not my fault. I would have to be... I would have to be... Oh, hang on, I've just been passed a memo. I can't talk to you anymore, Catherine. You've raised some very uncomfortable truths that my establishment masters will not let me continue to be aired. So I'm going to have to very, very politely thank you, and now I have to completely change the subject and talk about flowers. Thank you, Catherine. Anna is in Croydon. Anna, should we do a funny handshake?
Yeah, sure. How do you do that, though?
Okay. Oh, I can't tell you that if you don't know already, Anna, honestly. So what is going on? Well, help me. I can't see the surface anymore. I'm so far down the rabbit hole, I'm getting scared.
I'm a very selfish Remainer who also believes that the Leave campaign just doesn't have a chance, unfortunately.
Well, because of corruption or because of votes?
Because I think there are far too many vested interests, commercial, financial, international, in the Remain campaign.
But what happens if Leave wins? What happens to these views if Leave wins? They don't just go away. They escalate. They move on to the next conspiracy.
Well, that's we'll cross that bridge when we get there, but I genuinely believe that the votes will be swayed towards a certain result.
Swayed or illegally tampered with?
Perhaps illegally tampered with, but I'm sorry to shatter your fantasies about democracy in the West.
You're not shattering my fantasies about democracy, Anna. You're claiming that you live in a Kremlin-esque society. You're claiming that you live in a country that has the same regard for democracy as North Korea. I think it might be your fantasy rather than mine, with the greatest of respect and affection.
Okay, well, you see, not all votes are manual pieces of paper that get counted. A lot of them are counted by a computer, and unfortunately, due to very sophisticated software and statistical manipulations, it is possible to not completely change the results en masse, but to slightly sway it towards a certain direction.
Using the computer software?
Yes.
Okay.
No? You Have you looked into how the votes are counted, James?
Yes, the same way they're always counted. So,
well, unfortunately, in the 21st century, in 2016, not all votes are manual pieces of paper.
Okay, I mean, this is proof that it's rigged, is it?
It's not proof that it's rigged, no. But I honestly believe that, unfortunately, the Leave campaign won't be given a fair play.
Okay.
Sorry, James.
Why do you keep saying sorry? I mean, you say slightly mad things and then you apologise to me.
You sound very disappointed.
I'm not disappointed. Well, let me think of the right word. This is a very important moment for choosing the right word. Gobsmacked, actually. Gobsmacked.
Okay.
Not at what you're telling me, but at the fact that you're telling it to me. Do you see the difference, Anna? It's not. I mean, it's not these amazing truth bombs that you're dropping. It's the fact that you think they're truth bombs that I'm gobsmacked by.
Well, do you want to hear another funny fact? I'm actually from Russia myself, so and.
Well, then I can completely understand your lack of faith in democracy. But hey, we do things better here. Jassim is in Kilburn. Jassim, what would you like to say?
Hi there,
mate.
You know,
I don't know if I can take any more conspiracy theorists. Are you?
I'm laughing so much at this conversation, especially the person that brought up the Freemasons.
It's not funny.
Do you know, this is the problem, though. I don't think you realise just how many people do believe in conspiracy theories. Just yesterday, I was having an argument on Facebook with a girl who posted a picture of apparently a crisis actor that has been in 5 mass shootings in America and that they were set up by the government. And this had 20,000 comments of people saying, yes, this happened. So, you know, for them to say that it's rigged, I'm not surprised that they
You're doing your shopping. You're doing your shopping at the moment.
Do you know what? My mum wanted me to get her some stuff, so, yeah.
So are you at the self-service checkout?
Not at the self-service.
No, so there's someone serving. Don't be so rude, Jason. What would your mother say? There's somebody. I hate it when people are on the phone and the shop assistant's trying to talk to you.
There's a huge queue. I'm far behind.
So you're just in the queue. You're not actually out the checkout yet.
No.
What have you bought? What have you bought for your mum?
Well, my mum is Muslim. She wants to break her fast with some pastries and things like that.
Sounds delicious. Sounds delicious. And I guess you're probably poised to tell me that social media has acted as an enormous magnifying glass on a corner of society that has always existed.
100%. There's so much false things advertised on social media. It's actually insane. And I'm a pro Remain, but unfortunately, because I've been outside London recently, and the presence of vote leave is so strong. I'm actually worried. I'm genuinely worried. I think that
Well, I don't think there's any need. Well, I mean, I'm sort of worried in terms of the economic warnings and the economic forecast. But if you mean you're worried to know that your country is populated in part by people. I knew they were there. I just had no idea there were so many. It's 60 minutes after 11, and I presume that everybody listening breaks down into two camps now. People who, like Justin, are either, or like me, are either gobsmacked or giggling, or people who are shouting at the radio going, yes! Yes with the Freemasons! Yes for the New World Order! Yes, they're right! O'Brien, you can't handle the truth! They're gonna rig it! They're gonna rig it! Unless we win, in which case everything's wonderful and there's no rigging at all ever. Pick a number, any number. I've gone with 46. That is the percentage of people poised to vote Leave on Thursday who believe it is probably true that the referendum will be rigged. My social media research suggests that these people also believe that Leave will win. So presumably you'll change your mind about the rigging if Leave get the nod on Friday. The more serious point, and it only emerged 3/4 of the way through the last hour, the more serious point was that if you honestly believe our democracy is corrupt, you are halfway down the road to dismantling our democracy. This is what I have described many times as the slipper creep of fascism. Fascists don't kick your door in. They pretend that they're your friend. And if they are successfully persuading swathes of the country, or maybe the persuasion is coming from somewhere else, maybe I'm misreading the situation entirely. But once you have a significant minority of people who believe that any result, any electoral or democratic result they don't like is the result of corruption, then you can storm the citadel, then you can picket the parliament, then you can dismantle the democracy. You would very, very, very much struggle to dismantle a democratic system if everybody in it thought it was fair, everybody in it thought it was just, everybody in it thought it was the least bad is what it's always been called, isn't it? Our voting system, our parliamentary system, the least bad option when you look at all the other options historically, whether you're looking at sort of plutocracies or kleptocracies in Russia's case, aristocracies, monarchies, whatever it may be. We pride ourselves in this country on having it's not, when people say Britain has the mother of all parliaments, it's a misquote I read at the weekend. It's Britain itself, the country, is the mother of all parliaments. Britain is the mother of all parliaments, i.e. parliaments throughout the world followed our lead. I don't want to have a history argument about whether the ancient Greeks gave us democracy. Of course, they gave us the word and what. But in terms of parliamentary democracy, this country, as it stands today, is the mother of all parliaments, which is why it is so staggering and troubling that, depending on how you do the sums, 25% of the population in the mother of all parliaments believe that the parliament's corrupt. Wow. How has this happened? How has this happened? It's a bit like me thinking that the reason why Kidderminster Harriers aren't top of the Premier League is because of a conspiracy. We've obviously got the best team. Everybody I know, I go every Saturday, everyone I speak to loves Kidderminster Harriers. How come we've only got 2,000 crowd? It's ridiculous that Kidderminster Harriers aren't top of the table. How the hell did we get relegated? It's a fix. It's been rigged, because I love them. I love them and I think they're great. Why aren't they top of the world? Must be a fix. Must be when the world fails to reflect your own preconceived ideas or your own prejudices. Can't possibly be anything wrong with me. There must be something wrong with the world. That's where we are. Terry's in Sheffield. Terry, what would you like to say?
Mr. James O'Brien, you were a very naughty man.
Thank you, Terry. No, enough about my private life. Let's crack on with the conversation.
You're very mischievous. But I believe in these conspiracy things because I'm led by a person who has a bit of authority in this country, also believes them. I'm in good company.
Go on.
The establishment gets eventually what the establishment wants, and we are just all pawns in it. But if you recall, just a short time ago, a few years back, our beloved Queen, who's been on the throne a number of years and met a lot of these very high-ranking people, she said that there are some very dark people in this country. Now, is she a conspiracy theorist as well?
Dark forces?
Yes.
Remind me of the she didn't say dark people. That would be a controversy of a whole different flavour.
Yes, it was dark forces.
Remind me when she said that. Now that I've reminded you what she actually said, you remind me when she said it.
She was I think when she had that year of horrible horribilis or something. I know she mentioned there were some dark forces in operation in this country. But if they want something, the establishment will get what they want. And surely you're not naive enough to think they won't. We're just all pawns in this election.
I think, with the greatest of respect, that it was Paul Burrell, that slightly strange character who used to be Princess Diana's butler, who claimed that the Queen had warned him about dark forces.
So the Queen didn't actually say it. Paul Burrell misrepresented the Queen. No, well, that's disgraceful.
Well, hang on.
To do that sort of thing is terrible.
Well, you just rang me in to tell me it was true.
Well, as far as I was aware, it was. So we've got
Can't you do a little bit? Can't you?
Now we've got Paul Burrell misrepresenting the Queen and trying to cause another conspiracy that the Queen believes there's dark forces in this country.
Here you go. November 2002.
Excellent. Well, good.
Paul Burrell claimed last night that the Queen warned him that there were dark forces at work in Britain that could threaten him.
Well, he shouldn't have done that if it was not true, should he, James? That's terrible.
I don't know, Terry, I don't know what point you think you're making, mate.
I'm trying to put a little counter-argument like you keep doing all the time.
Yeah, but my counter-arguments are based on facts. Yours was based on a complete falsehood.
So everything you believe is based on facts, and everything you say is based on facts.
No, Paul Burrell said dark forces. That's a fact, not the Queen. You said it was the Queen. Well, that was your counter-argument.
No, but Paul Burrell said it was the Queen, so if I was
wrong,
so
did you.
I apologise. I apologise for that.
Okay, well, you're apologising for being wrong. I'm not wrong.
There's nothing wrong with that, is
Why would I apologise for being right?
Well, no, you...
And this is the reason why you believe in conspiracy theories, because of something you were wrong about.
On this particular occasion, you're absolutely right.
It's always on this particular occasion, Terry. It's always on this particular occasion I'm wrong and you're right. But you rang in to tell me you believe in conspiracy theories, particularly in the context of the one that we're examining today, because of something you got the words wrong and you got who said it wrong. Do you still believe it? Do you still believe in conspiracy theories?
I believe what the establishment wants it gets.
Okay, so your example for believing that, you got the person who said it wrong, and you got the words wrong. You thought it was the Queen talking about dark people. It was her deeply odd butler talking about dark forces. But you still think you're right, and that your point somehow is supported by the thing you've just apologised for getting wrong. And Terry, mate, mischievous it may be, but that is a perfect call in many ways, because that is, I think, almost the poster for the constituency of people that we're talking about. Person A says, why do you believe what you believe? Person B, Terry in Sheffield, says, well, I believe what I believe because the Queen once said this. Person A points out the Queen never said that, and in fact the person who did say it wasn't the person who said what you think the Queen said but were wrong about never said it at all in the first place. Yeah, but I'm still convinced that I'm right. Richard is in Hammersmith. Richard, what's going on?
Hello there, James.
Hello, Richard.
Well, I am the elusive Remainer that you've been looking for, but I
thought I'd found one, and it didn't go well. I'm not going to lie to you. I think Catherine's still trying to work out who Tupac Shakur was. So you want to remain in the European Union, but you think the vote will be rigged?
No, I don't. Well, let me just explain what I feel about what rigged. I do not think the count will be rigged. I think that's preposterous.
Oh.
I think that
well, you're not the Holy Grail, then.
Well, except what I would say, because you alluded to this before, I believe that if there is a small majority in favour of Brexit, which I sincerely hope there isn't, I think it's almost impossible that we will leave the Union, and I think that what will happen is there will be a kind of fudge which many UKIP supporters will believe is a conspiracy theory, and we will not ultimately be able to leave the Union because it's far too difficult after 40 years of legislation. It would be almost impossible to leave, and I think that there will be a fudge which will be considered as a conspiracy.
I can come with you most of the way on that, but that's not what we asked. Is it likely that the EU referendum will be rigged, not that the aftermath will be fudged? And of course, you use the word fudge advisedly. This is why the whole idea of a binary referendum was, with the benefit of 2020 hindsight, so ridiculous. A question so complex, boiled down to a simple box-ticking exercise, is absurd. But you're right, a lot of people, and they're going to have to fit into the category that are overrepresented on one side with no formal education and a subscription to beliefs in corruption. 64% of UKIP voters think it's going to be rigged. If you buy into that worldview, everything looks like a conspiracy.
Well, indeed, James, because in fact, the ridiculousness of this whole referendum is proven by many of the people who've called in and given.
Well, it's a bit rude, but I can't really argue with you.
Well, yeah, what I tried to do was not quite fit into your mould of somebody to say I'm a Remainer and I believe that the world is rigged and we're all subject to a conspiracy.
The Earth is flat.
But what I'm saying to you is that it will be perceived as rigged, irrespective of the outcome, by those lunatic fringes who will always believe.
Well, no, because it could be. So even if we vote to leave and it doesn't somehow turn out to be a brave new dawn where everyone gets a money tree in their front garden and we can all.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, but then nothing can ever change the mind of somebody like that, ever. I mean, what would success look? I tried to do this on Friday. What would success look like for the people pushing in one direction? What does a result mean?
The result for certain people means that a lot of foreigners are thrown out of the country and that we live in their distorted view of the world. But it won't happen, thank goodness. And even their muted version of what they want to see will not happen because of the complexity of exiting what would a single market after so many years. It's almost impossible. And you can ask any international lawyer. It is almost impossible for this to happen. So a lot of your listeners and people around the country who are foolish enough not to listen to you, I believe there are they are going to be disappointed.
Well, I mean, in the sense that the leaving of the European Union will press ahead, the idea that it will be incredibly complicated and probably not please all of the people all of the time, I don't think that's an even close to controversial observation. But as you acknowledged yourself, you're not quite my holy grail because you're not subscribing to the notion of actual rigging, actual corruption. At best obfuscation, at worst profound complication is what you're predicting, and I wouldn't necessarily argue with either of those. Well, okay, so now you know, 11:31, what people sound like. People who normally just appear to you as numbers on opinion polls. This is what they sound like. Not so much like Richard, obviously, but like many of my previous callers, talking about Freemasons and the Twin Towers and vote rigging. It's time to ask this question. How has this happened? Has this always been the case? Or have we seen in the last few years a shift in the tectonic plates of truth, where perception has now, for a significant number of people, trumped reality? And I use that verb advisedly. Nimco says, I've just tuned in, James. I've got absolutely no idea what's going on. Well, arguably that makes two of us. And Steve B maybe will confuse you even more, Nimco, when he's managed to see a funny side to these conversations. Dear James, I am a Freemason and it looks like I'm going to be very busy on Thursday. Reference to some previous calls. Look, I'm not going to lie to you. I find this frankly surreal, this whole conversation. Thanks to my wonderful box of trolls. It's not that massive a surprise to me to know that these views exist. They're kind of, the Earth is flat, how dare you suggest otherwise? My whole life is somebody else's fault, how dare you suggest otherwise? It is a massive surprise to learn that the numbers are this big. 46% of people on the vote leave side. According to our poll, it's only one poll, responded to this statement: it is likely that the EU referendum will be rigged, by saying probably true. 11% on the Remain side, 18% of don't know as well. So, wow. What do you make of it? And how has it happened? This disconnect between reality and perception. I don't think that you will be able to prove that you're right. And of course, I don't think anyone can prove that you're wrong. But to believe that you're right is to believe that you live in a country like North Korea. You may well believe that. You may well believe that. who persuaded you? How did, or not, what persuaded you? What do you look at and think, there you go? It would be nice if we could leave the moon landings and the attacks on the World Trade Center and the assassination of JFK. It would be nice if we could not bring them to the table as proof that you're right to believe in conspiracies. Because I suppose it has to be acknowledged that at some point some conspiracy theories turn out to be true. For me, I still think there are very, very, very grisly and ugly secrets in the corridors of power involving child sex abuse. I think of that Tory whip that we played out a lot last year, talking about how if an MP got into trouble with small boys, they'd make the problem go away and then use it as leverage to get him to do what they wanted subsequently. The Cyril Smith story. There's too much around there, and of course there's a massive investigation underway. Question is now, what creates this view? You can't be born thinking that you live in North Korea, unless you actually do live in North Korea. You can't be born in a parliamentary democracy with a free press and free speech and conclude immediately, or as soon as you're conscious, as soon as you're compos mentis, conclude that everything's corrupt. How do you end up thinking? How do you end up thinking that they, the establishment, the elite, the government, whoever this is, whoever they are corrupt, and that our democracy is a sham? Gary's in Halstead. Gary, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. I am one of those fake people who scrutineer at the counts.
Fake is the description one of my previous callers applied, is it?
That's exactly right, yeah.
Can you prove you're not a Freemason?
Well, I can't prove it to you now, but I can say on my heart of hearts I'm not a Freemason.
You would say that, wouldn't you? Gary, so tell us what you do at the count. What is it you do, and what's your official title?
Well, basically, I mean, we are just members of the public who scrutiny what the people who are counting the votes are doing. So we stand and watch as they count the votes and make sure that there's nothing untoward that goes on. I mean, it's been driving me mad on Facebook and social media lately. Everything from make sure you take a pen and make sure you don't use a pencil because they're going to rub it out, and it's absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
So this was Catherine who asked me how I know that what goes on, and I said, but effectively my answer was because of people like Gary in Halstead, although I didn't know that you were listening at the time, because I know that our democratic system has checks and balances in place to ensure the representation of the public at the count, and you are that representative. How do you get that gig, Gary?
Well, basically, it's local groups are invited to send along people. So I'm a member of the local Labour Party. At a general election, I turn up with local Liberals, local Tories, BNP, everyone that is...
UKIP have their own people watching UKIP. These things?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think in the referendum, it's been people who are chosen from the Leave campaign and people who are chosen from the Remain campaign. So, there's an equal balance of people from both sides. They both all stand over these poor, hard-working council workers, because they're the people who actually count the votes, people from your local council, who've been basically, slaving away. And the checks and balances, as you say, are done. That's another conspiracy theory that drives me mad, that the fact that there's a number on your ballot paper means that they can tell who you're going to vote for, and it's literally just to make sure the numbers add up. Literally to make sure you don't have two votes, and at the end of the night they've got the same number of ballots posted as the number of ticks on the book, and it just as you say, as you said, people say, oh well, you would say that.
Yeah, I know. Well, Wayne is joking. I happen to know Wayne, and he's being cheeky. He's tweeted to say, "Stooge caller alert! Stooge caller alert! Set up caller, rigged caller alert! Gary doesn't actually exist. If you tear off his mask, you will find David Cameron underneath going, and I would have got away with it too if it wasn't for you pesky radio presenters." It's not funny though, because I probably sounds a little bit hyperbolical of me, but I do think if you can convince enough people that democracy is rigged, you're halfway towards dismantling it and just putting your fella in charge and letting him or her do whatever they want.
I think you're right, but I think the thing to blame, unfortunately, because I love it, is the internet, and the access that people have to share in these stupid notions. These are amazing ideas, and other people go, oh, do you know what? he must have a point. You know, it rained last Thursday, and that was blame. You know, that's obviously with the Russians. You know, and it just.
Well, I used the analogy at the beginning of the bloke in the pub. I was remembering a caller during the junior doctors' strike who said he didn't believe that they had any public support because everyone he'd spoken to thought exactly the same as he did. And I realised that in a pub, he'd be the bloke who's standing there bloviating, and 80% of the other customers shift very sort of slyly away. But there's 20% left. 10 of them will nod along with him because they're hoping he's going to finish soon, and 10% might actually agree. So he comes out of the pub thinking 100% of people agree with him. Actually, it was 10%. On the internet, you can surround yourself with that 10%. You can find everybody, and everyone does it. It's by no means confined to one political movement or one political party, but the notion of an echo chamber is probably best determined by how much hatred you have for any opposing opinion. Proper evidence-based factual opinion. And the ultimate embodiment of hatred of evidence and fact-based opinion would be to say that votes are actually rigged. So there's no point even counting anymore, Gary, because I know that I'm right, and anybody that disproves me or disagrees with me is either corrupt or aberrant or I don't know, insert your own adjective there.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, and it's incredibly frustrating. As someone who's been involved in in local politics and local democracy, so since I was about 16, and I'm 50 now. I find it so frustrating because not everybody is corrupt, not everybody is in it for their own good, and some people have got a real interest in their local community, a real interest in democracy. And those people just get tarred with the same brush as this tiny percentage who make it look bad. And then as the conspiracy theory just grows and grows and grows and grows. And
you run away from anybody who disproves it. That's the point. And worse than running away, you hurl stuff at them, abuse, and you call them this and you call them that, and you stick your fingers in your ears and you put your tinfoil hat on and you just squint ever so slightly so you only see a tiny little slither of reality, and you convince yourself that's all the reality there is.
Yes.
Happy day. Happy days. What's your official title? Are you called an official observer or something like that, or?
No, I just think it's a scrutineer.
That's why, but it is. There is a process under which each party, each side puts forward their person, and you all turn up and make sure that no one's shoving ballot papers in their back pocket or blowing their nose on them. And I mean, it really is that simple, isn't it?
And no one's got a rubber, and
no one's got a rubber. I mean, you laugh. I mean, we had that conversation during Mystery Hour the other day. Take a pen to the ballot box. Do you know why? One of the reasons you can't use pens? Invisible ink. 0345 60 973. You live and learn, eh? Here's my favourite of the day. There's a little clip gone now saying, watch a gobsmacked at Mr. James O.B. grapple with 46% of Leave voters who predict a rigged result, to which Lee Steggles has replied, I believe it will be rigged, but we still got to get out and vote out tomorrow. To which the voice of Bramley has replied, you'll be a bit disappointed then, voting is on Thursday, not tomorrow, and then in brackets, this is the calendar, not a conspiracy. David in Fleet, stay where you are, because I think you're also going to provide us with an eyewitness account of what a non-rigged election looks like. I'm just going to speak quickly to Mark in Coventry because he's been waiting longer. Mark, what would you like to say?
Okay, well, I'm involved in the campaign. I'm not someone official, as it were, but I'm simply a campaigner who has been a member of a political party before, stood as a parliamentary local now changed party, and I'm also involved with campaigning Vote Leave. My opinion is it's not rigged. It's interesting. I'm just following the previous caller Gary in terms of what he said, the procedures. But having said that, I wouldn't quite just give such a positive sort of reflection on the procedures. Mistakes are made.
Mistakes
are made. Sometimes, yes, mistakes are made in counts, which can actually result in someone losing or winning. Has happened
because human beings are involved.
Yes, I think, and with the best scrutiny in the world, mistakes are made. But I think my opinion is, when it comes to Leave people who have expressed their desire to vote Leave, they're perfectly normal, rational people. I don't see some of what I've heard this morning in terms of on the doorsteps. They're just people who simply want to exercise their vote for a variety of reasons, be it immigration, economy.
Hey, Mark, absolutely fair play to you, mate. And yesterday I dedicated quite a significant part of the programme to acknowledging the fact that a lot of people who abhor the sort of xenophobia and racism that have been far too prevalent in the whole country actually for years, not just for weeks, are on the Leave side. There's loads of them, loads and loads. I'm related to some of them.
I wouldn't say that, James. I wouldn't say that, really. Perhaps I've just been, and I say this, I've been doing it every night, just going campaigning. I don't see what you're saying in terms of the Leave camp.
No, I'm agreeing with you. I'm agreeing with you.
Good, thank you.
Yes,
Good.
there is loads and loads and loads of people on the Leave side who are a million miles away from the racism and xenophobia that some people on that side of the argument seem to subscribe to. The question of what happens at the count, Mark. Talk me through that. What do you know about that?
Well, when it comes to the I suppose a general point, I can see why some people think things are rigged, inverted commas, because there may be some people who are cynical, and actually I can be at times, because I know, and probably the public do as well, that various parties will make certain attempts to try and swing things somewhere, be it at the count or sort of on the day of the count, or things that they do when they're campaigning. Just a small example, a polling station, there are rules and regulations in terms of what a candidate or party can do, and some of them will try and bend those rules, as in, for example, they might have some vehicles parked nearby the polling station with vote whoever it is that they're representing.
Yes, of course.
It's subtle. It's very subtle. It's trying to...
But that's not rigging, is it?
I know, but it's bending the rules, because the rules themselves are actually slightly vague at times in terms of what you can and can't do. And in terms of Gary talking about scrutinising the votes during the count, I've seen mistakes made. I've seen boxes lost in corners or boxes discovered by people who aren't quite that diligent, even though they're being scrutinised, and it can affect the outcome.
Yes, but no one knows what's in the boxes.
Well, you know that there's voting slips in the boxes, and
yes.
When it comes to, say, a local election, and you've got a ward where it's pretty tight between one candidate and the other, it can mean...
Which is why people like Gary are there, and it's why people like you have seen it happen and called it out, to make sure that it doesn't have an undue influence on results, yes. Which is why it's not rigged. It's categorically not rigged. It's unriggable. But... won't persuade anyone. I must do, mustn't it? You got 46% in this survey. People who've now heard it explained to them in absolutely clear and concise fashion that they're wrong. They have to be wrong. It would surely go down by half, would it? Down to 23%? I don't know. And then everyone else carries on thinking that the sun revolves around the earth. David's in Fleet. David, what would you like to say?
Well, that ballot box that we put our piece of paper, our folded piece of paper in, is taken... It's sealed. It's sealed before it's ever a single vote is cast and placed in it. I'm a counting agent. I will be on Thursday into the early hours of Friday.
Stooge.
That box is the seal is checked on arrival at the count.
Yeah, checked by who though? Probably a Freemason.
All of us. Of us. Those from all political parties in a general election or none, and this one will be exactly the same. People on all sides, including these high-ranking council officials and low-ranking council officials and people who normally work in banks. As you said, the conspiracy theory would need to involve everybody.
Yes, of course, and all parties as well. So if you were rigging it for the monster raving loonies, you'd have to have Labour, Tory, and UKIP on board. If you're rigging it for the BNP, you'd have to have the Liberal Democrats and Labour on board. You'd need everyone to be complicit, would you?
Those boxes are then checked that they came from where they came from. The seals are broken in front of all these witnesses. The boxes are tipped out, literally, so we see the votes spilling out onto the desks, which are all in plain view. There's nothing underneath. It's not like the masked magician. We then watch them sift them roughly into piles. There's nowhere to hide. You couldn't stuff them in your handbag or put them up your jumper. And we're all watching and wandering around. And not just us, but the people who are doing it are doing the same thing. And they're counted.
What have you heard then? What have you heard for the? I don't know how much you've been listening to, but we've been doing this for 2 hours now. What have you heard? What in terms of your?
It's deeply depressing to think that all of us are going to spend the night. People like me wasting their Thursday night into the early hours of Friday, marching around, kind of, I don't know, doing your little bit of civic duty. And there are people out there who think that somehow it can still be rigged. But when your result is declared and the numbers are verified and agreed by everybody in that room, they're then usually the media, of course, in attendance. The media will then say, this is the result of that election. Yeah, but there'll be people from all...
I know that. I'm in the choir. You're preaching to the choir.
This is the result for, this is the result against. There is no possible... And then, when the national government, of course, who may be tempted to cheat on the numbers, when they declare a result... We'd have to all be saying, no, it wasn't.
No, I know, you'd all have to be paid off. Every single one of you, David and Gary and everybody else in the room, up and down the land. But hey, they're still out there. They're still convinced it's rigged. The response to the proof that the referendum on Thursday won't be rigged seems to have enraged some people even more than the belief that it would be, which is where we are now in British politics. The numbers are significant enough to be scary. People who actually believe the earth is flat, people who actually believe that the sun revolves around our planet rather than the other way around. And it's not unique to our period in history, as those two parallels prove. You could have got sent to the Spanish Inquisition for making the argument of heliocentrism. Galileo Galilei did. And was it Columbus, I suppose, who proved that the Earth wasn't flat? Who can prove that the referendum won't be rigged, if not the people who actually watch the count or do the count? It's incredible. It is actually incredible. And it's funny, and thank you for all the kind words about how amusing you found the last couple of hours. I don't want to rain on your parade, but it's not that funny, you know, because if you can convince people, and remember, every political party knows what our callers have known. Every single political party leadership machine knows this. They have their own people at the count, all of them. They know this. So if you have one party, like in this case UKIP, 64% of their supporters believe things will be rigged. I'll say again, presumably if we vote to leave, that number will plummet. But if the vote doesn't go the way they want, they will be convinced that it was rigged. Now, whose job is it to persuade them? Who do they believe? They don't believe anybody else. They don't believe me. They don't believe that bloke over there from the Tory party or that woman over there from the Labour Party. Who do they believe when it comes to these matters? Who is best placed to tell them? No, we send our own scrutineers. We are actually witnessing the count. We are actually there, like my last caller. Surely there's a question to be asked about what that says. What that really says about a politician's view of his or her supporters. Here's a supporter of a politician. Oh, well, I think the vote is rigged. Here's a politician who knows categorically that it isn't. Well, I couldn't possibly comment on that. I certainly was very surprised to lose. Shouldn't you be telling them that they're wrong? Shouldn't you be telling them to have faith in the democratic system, even though it will not always deliver what they want? There isn't a politicized individual on the planet who is going to get the result that they want from every single election or referendum that they're part of. And this is where it gets scary. This is where it gets scary. Where the politicians, specifically followed by people who believe in conspiracies and believe in corruption and don't believe in democracy, are not being told by their heroes and heroines that they're wrong. Because that leaves you wondering, why would you want your supporters to believe something you know not to be true? And it doesn't matter what party you belong to. If you were a Labour voter who believed it was rigged when the Tories won, it's the responsibility of the Labour Party to tell you that it wasn't. If you're a Conservative Party supporter who believed it was rigged when Labour won, you're not going to believe Labour when they tell you it wasn't rigged. It's the job of the Conservatives to come out and say, no, it wasn't rigged. We had our own people there. We watched. But with social media, boom, right around the world. Oh, yeah, they had magic pencils. Oh, yeah, they had special sieves you had to wear. When apparently I've seen some pictures and there was a bloke who was at all the different counts looking suspicious. Yeah, well, whose job is it? Who can actually help these people give up the delusion? Who can free them? I can't. Political opponents can't. So you're left with a very, very serious question. Why wouldn't a bona fide human being possessed of integrity, decency and honesty tell their supporter that they're wrong when they say, I believe it's rigged? Oh, you can fill in the gaps yourself on that. Karen's in Woodford Green. Karen, what's going on?
Hi, James. How are you?
Very well, mate. What's on your mind?
Okay. I think I'm going to be voting Leave, and I don't think this election is rigged or cannot be rigged. And the call is...
It shouldn't really be surprising, should it? I mean, given that today's show has been a little bit unrepresentative, but you are still just in the majority, 54%.
Yeah. And I'll tell you why, just to add to some of the very qualified comments, from the callers earlier. To rig an election, you have to be in one of those third world countries from where I originally came from. The amount of effort, money, manpower, in some cases alcohol required to rig an election is scandalous. UK is far from those shows, so let's just establish with some of my fellow leavers that it cannot happen in this country. I think the point I actually wanted to make was how this has been run and why it's been run. And the point I made to the researcher earlier was, if you look at how Leave and Remain campaign have run, they've actually picked on the points that they think their vote bank believe in. So it's been about retaining the people who are going to vote for them rather than breaking away or eating into the support for the other camp. So the Leave camp think, if we talk about immigration, if we talk about NHS, the people who believe in us will buy it even further. So let's hang on to these people and not lose them and make them from switching camps. And this is sort of the line that plays into that really well. This has been rigged. Whoever has run this is just making sure that old Leavers come out in full flock in droves to vote and keep the momentum going. And
but why would they bother voting if they believe it's going to be rigged?
But that's the funny thing.
Funny?
That's the thing. So you basically, as someone, whoever's run the story, is making sure that they come out just to have their numbers on their side as a sort of a protest, or sort of make sure that the numbers are so high enough that it cannot be rigged, that it would require a mass-scale operation, to rig this. So it's making sure that all the Leave people who are thinking about voting Leave come out to defeat the people who are going to rig it.
That suggests that you can have degrees of rigification, that you can say, well, if you'll definitely be rigged unless you are. But there is a point at which there'll be such a powerful vote it won't be rigged at all.
Exactly.
I love your line about alcohol.
But it's playing on those lines to make sure that the people who are going to vote Leave come out and do vote. Actually, that's what they're playing on.
But yes, and that might explain why so many people believe it. But then they're deliberately lying to their followers. They're deliberately lying to their supporters, knowingly lying. Admittedly, there's a lot of lying going on. Everybody does it. But to lie about your faith in democracy is to, well, that's all. That's actually pretty grim.
Have you ever found an honest politician, James?
Yes, I have.
Please introduce.
I'm just trying to think of one. I don't like these sort of observations. There must be some honest politicians. I'll tell you what. The late Jo Cox seems to me, from everything I've found out about her, to have been a woman of impeccable integrity and honesty and decency. But because she wasn't a self-publicist and desperately seeking microphones and television cameras, we didn't hear her name really until it was too late. And I think Parliament has an awful lot of people in it who are quietly getting on with looking after their constituents' interests and representing their voters. But I take your point. Well, you find me a human being that's never told a lie, Karen, and I'll come back to you with a politician who hasn't. All right?
Yeah. But that's the thing as well, I think with politicians, the one who shouts the loudest is probably the truest, and I think that plays in the art of politicians. If you make enough noise, people will think you're probably true.
And if you're selling tickets for the ghost train, you're going to have a massive queue right around the block, compared to the poor fellow over there who's selling tickets for the Speak Your Weight machine and can't give them away. Karen, thank you. Peter is in Ipswich. Peter, what's going on?
Oh, not a lot. I'm having more confusion with the European football than I am with the referendum. I've been a citizen now for 2 years. I'm a citizen of the UK. Yes. I got 3 football teams over there. But as far as the referendum goes, when they said they were going to have it, they said they were going to put the information out so we could choose. Now, but the government didn't do that. They went to the Bank of England, Mark Carney, had him do up a report.
No, well, they didn't have him do up a report. Gordon Brown freed the Bank of England from government control categorically and incontrovertibly. Mark Carney and the MPC, the Monetary Policy Committee, are the very embodiment of independence. Now, there's an argument that Jacob Rees-Mogg made very well on this programme, that they shouldn't get involved in issues like this, but you cannot suggest that they have been nobbled or got at or in any way compromised, because that's not only is that deeply offensive, it's actually a criminal offence. It's libel.
No. Well, then why did Mark Carney actually say that on the Andrew Marr show?
He didn't.
He did. He actually says he couldn't come up with any other report because of the parameters and guidelines that the government gave him.
No, that's not true. That's not true.
No, I'm just repeating what he actually
you're simply not. You're simply not. So Mark Carney said on the Andrew Marr show that he had deliberately lied to the British public because the government ordered him to.
Yep. You could go on the iPlayer or get the BBC.
Mate, I can't. I don't know what you heard, but you did not hear the governor of the Bank of England saying that he wrote the report that David Cameron wanted him to write. You heard him saying the precise opposite of that. How that got lost on the journey from your ears to your brain is well, that is another mystery to add to the long list of mysteries that we're learning today. It's 12:14. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Well, still, you can't get a cigarette paper onto the switchboard, but as I bid farewell to Peter, who's going off to go and double-check that thing off the telly when the governor of the Bank of England admitted he was biased, and then he'll come back and prove it to me. You can grab that phone line quickly. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. It's 12:15. And, well, nearly there. Just intrigued today in people who don't think there's any point voting because it will be rigged. Does that mean you're not going to vote, or does it mean you've been played for a bit of a fool by people who want you to believe that you shouldn't have any faith in democracy, but who actually know that democracy is pretty sound in this country and think by convincing you that it isn't, you might be more likely to go out to vote, so that the numbers are so great that riggers won't be able to pull off the biggest con of our times? Wow. 90 minutes after 12. If you're just tuning in, this has been a real eye-opener. I was minded to dismiss the findings of our own poll. 46% of people poised to vote leave, 11% of people poised to vote remain. Respond to the statement, it is likely that the EU referendum will be rigged, by ticking the box marked probably true. Probably true. And, well, 2 hours and 20 minutes in, I'm still being bombarded by people keen to contribute to the conversation, many of whom presumably are in that 46%, despite now having heard from the people charged with ensuring that you can't rig a vote. 12:19 is the time. Simon is in Harlesden. Simon, what would you like to say?
Good morning. Good afternoon, James.
Hello.
I think if people... Well, I'm not no skepticism, but because of what people have been saying in the past few elections we've been having, I always carry a pen with me. Like, you know, a ballpoint pen. And I just, you know...
Well, because you think if you vote with a pencil, someone might rub it out and change it.
Yeah. But...
Who would do that, do you think?
Well, you know, people just, you know, like government officials, basically.
Government officials?
I'm no skepticism, but I've seen lately on social media, on Facebook, especially
when do government officials get their hands on your ballot paper, do you think?
Preferably when we're not looking, you know, like when they're counting. You know, as we're, you know...
I didn't think they do it when you were looking, but at what point do you think they get their hands on it?
After when all things wind down, like 10 o'clock, after 10 o'clock, when they open the ballot papers, they count as, paper...
But you've heard the two men who were there when that happened, telling you that this doesn't go on, and you just think they're, what, fibbers, liars? Or maybe they were looking the other direction or popped to the lavatory when they got their hands on yours and tried to rub out your pencil vote.
Well, to be honest, you see on like I said just a few seconds ago, there were people posting videos on Facebook saying votes have been tucked away, and they're saying videos of, you know, like when they're actually counting, and then there's people actually zooming into the TV saying, look, there's unaccounted votes. But if we should be like the Americans, you know, like how Americans vote, they just touch on the screen. That will, in all honesty, that I would be safer with that.
But our previous conspiracy theorist wrongly claimed that you can vote electronically in this referendum, and that was proof it was going to be corrupt. Now you're saying the fact that you can't is proof that it could be rigged. You see why this is surreal for a lot of people listening.
But I will say, you know...
I could hack your computer right now. I've seen the call centre in India when I was doing some work for Watchdog over at the Beeb. They'd take over my computer in front of me and start deleting files, and yet you would have faith in an electronic system because you don't trust pencils.
Yeah, well, what you should have.
Shut the front door, man. Come on, Simon.
You press the vote. Say for example, say I want to leave, which I'm not. I'm going to remain. But if you say I want to leave on the screen, a little receipt will come out and say thank you, and it'll have a confirmation what you voted, and that you're
like a receipt, so you can take your receipt away.
You can take the receipt and show and put it in the box.
And then the result goes the wrong way, and what do you do then?
Well,
how do you prove that because you haven't got the result that you wanted?
Because it's got your name on it. It will have your name on it and say.
So it's not a secret ballot anymore.
It will say your name and it will say your details. It will say your ballot number and it will say, you voted such and such with that receipt with your details on it.
But you'd have to have everybody else's receipts as well to do an alternative count, Simon.
Well, you can just put it in the box. Like I said, just like with the ballot papers, you stick it in the box.
So do you think it's going to be rigged on Thursday?
There's a small chance it could be.
And you're going to vote to remain?
Yes.
Hallelujah, we found you. It has taken 2 hours and 23 minutes. You're supposed to be 11% representation. You're going to vote to remain, and yet you think it will be rigged. What, to the other side or to your side?
To our side.
They will be rigged in favour of remain?
Yes.
But you don't need to vote then?
Well, I will be voting.
Well, you don't need to. They'll get a robot to do it for you. Don't laugh at me, man. I'm just holding up a mirror.
Well, I'll definitely be voting.
Everyone should vote. Well, regardless of how you're going to vote, everyone should vote. But if you believe in this rigging theory, as 46% of Leave, 64% of UKIP voters do, why bother? Robert is in Sittingbourne in Kent. I can't remember a show like this one, Robert, and please God we never have one again. This will be the last referendum of both our lifetimes.
Right. Well, it keeps your programme interesting. Good afternoon, James.
Yes.
First of all, I'll say I'm not a conspiracy theorist, and I laugh out loud at most of the conspiracies. But I think we should be a bit wary and sceptical as well, bearing in mind what's happened in certain elections in this country in the past. Can I just point out, as far as I understand, this isn't like a general election where each vote is being counted and scrutinised by constituency basis. I understand I may be wrong, but I understand the votes for the referendum are going to be counted in a slightly different way. Am I correct in that? Do you know?
I don't know what I don't know what you're telling me. We've spoken to 2 election scrutineers who've said they will be working on Thursday and it will be business as usual. Whether
on a constituency basis.
Whether or not it's in the same rooms as it usually is, I don't know. But the same people will be observing, and we've spoken to them.
Can I just make a point? Sorry. There have been, I know we live in a democracy, but there have been cases of dodgy voting in council elections. For instance, Tower Hamlets is an example.
Yes, that was religious manipulation, the first time since the 19th century that anybody... And we've also had problems with postal votes in the past as well, most notably in Birmingham.
That was my other point.
Yeah, but guess what? How do you know about them?
Well, some of it's seeped out.
What do you mean it's seeped out? It's been reported, investigated, and prosecuted. That is the nature of our parliamentary democracy. And the Birmingham story was personation mostly, postal votes impersonation, where I turn up at the poll and say I am Robert in Sittingbourne, and then I cast your vote for you, and you turn up. And if you don't turn up at all, no one ever knows anything dodgy has gone on. And if you do turn up and try and cast your vote and get told someone already has, then you bust it. And the postal votes. I mean, how would one side be able to manipulate the postal votes more than the other side?
Well, you see,
why do you keep laughing when I pick a hole in your own points?
Well, it depends who...
Unless you're laughing at yourself.
No,
so postal votes postal votes are susceptible to manipulation. Let's just put that up there as a possibility.
Wait a minute. Yeah, I'm not talking about the act. Yes, but
why would one side be more likely to do it than the other side?
No, I'm not. Yes, but we're assuming that these postal votes actually exist, aren't we? I mean.
Oh boy. Okay, so now we're going to talk about postal votes that don't exist.
Well, I don't like the idea of so many. It was okay in the past when it was disabled people or elderly people, but when there's a significant proportion of votes that are being counted differently, let's say from the ballot, they're not being put directly into a ballot box.
Why would the postal votes favour one side or the other, or the possibility to manipulate postal votes to get hold of your grannies and fill it in yourself?
No, my point is not so much the actual post, it's the people counting these postal votes.
are they under the same scrutiny as, for instance, the vote that goes into the ballot box?
No, they're not. They sit in a shed at the bottom of their own garden and just ring in the result.
Well, I think there's some... can I just point out...
No, mate, you can't. No. Because you've made 3 points and they've all been so ridiculously bad, I can't let you make another. It's not fair on all the other people waiting to talk to me.
Just very quick.
No, it's just not fair, because you should... Is it even worse than the ones you've already made, or have you been saving the best till last, like roast potatoes at Sunday lunch?
Be fair.
Go on, then.
All right. W. Bush, the dodgy Chads in Florida, that was a dodgy election. JFK, it's been documented he got the mafia and the Teamsters to... because that was a very close vote with Nixon, wasn't it, in 1960?
Yeah, it was. JFK and George W. Bush. Absolutely incontrovertible evidence that everything's going to be rigged on Thursday. 28 minutes after 12. Robert, mind how you go. I should have trusted my instincts on that one. James is in Romford. James, what do you reckon?
Hi. Well, people like him make people like me look bad.
Why? Are you a conspiracy theorist and he's giving you a bad name?
Yeah, I'm a conspiracy theorist.
Brilliant.
I don't believe it's rigged. You know, I've actually read up about this, and
what can I ask? Can I ask what conspiracies you do believe in?
What do I believe?
Yeah, what conspiracies do you subscribe to?
110% 9/11.
Right. Carry on. Any others?
Asbestos. That was they held up. They said it was a total lie.
Go on.
Proven. What else? You ask me and I'll tell you yes or no.
Moon landings.
They did land on it, but the footage you see is not the correct footage.
Did the Freemasons kill Tupac?
That's ridiculous. These are the ones that get thrown in to make people like, you know, this is what it is. They muddy the waters with all these ridiculous ones.
I know.
To make the real ones look, you know, questionable.
I know. So you believe that the moon landings footage was doctored? That who blew up the World Trade Center if it wasn't Al Qaeda?
Who organised it?
Yeah.
Well, it was a combination of America.
Yeah.
It's called the what is it called?
I don't know, mate. You're the expert.
Sorry, mate. I ain't got my computer in front of me like you know.
That's all right. You're like me. I don't need. So the moon landing's dodgy. World Trade Center dodgy. JFK.
JFK, yeah, that was blatantly dodgy.
Dodgy.
2 different bullets come from 2 different trajectories.
Has Tim Peake actually been in space, James?
Of course he has.
All right. And will the vote on Thursday be rigged?
No.
Stop giving conspiracy theorists like James a bad name. Is there anything?
Yeah, it's right.
It's just not right. You've been out there doing your research.
I know.
Tapping away on your computer, and all these Johnny-come-latelys coming in here with allegations of vote rigging. They don't know what day it is.
I know. It's terrible, isn't it?
Terrible. I've got your back, mate. All right.
To the human race.
I've got your back, James. I remember when conspiracy theorists were. I do. Thank you for the call. First world problems for Charlie Boy. He's just tweeted me to say I almost choked on my panini during the last call. The last call was a special moment. I love you, James. A fully paid up member of many conspiracy theories. JFK's assassination, stone cold conspiracy. I don't like laughing at conspiracies about the Twin Towers because the tragedy was so profound, but in James's world, through James's eyes, stone cold conspiracy. I forgot to ask him whether he thought Elvis was still alive, but the moon landings, he thinks people did go there. Footage, stone cold conspiracy. He was absolutely clear. He believes Tim Peake has actually been in space, but the point of his call was to complain that all the people claiming the referendum will be rigged, which is 46% of people intending to vote leave, according to our poll today. 64% of people who describe themselves as UKIP voters. They're giving him a bad name. He's sick of people. So these conspiracy theorists who don't know what day of the week it is, coming in and giving a bad name to all other conspiracy theorists. Ian's been in touch to say, James, you've often asked on your programme what the world would be like, or the country would be like tomorrow if we legalised all drugs today. I suspect the last 2.5 hours may have provided your answer. And yet some people, rather than seeing the funny side, remain determined to see the furious, to stay furious, to be furious. Okay, you are someone who believes that if the referendum doesn't go the way you want it to go, it will be proof that it has been rigged. Apart from lovely Simon, who even if it goes the way he wants it to go, and he is pro-Remain, he still believes there's a significant chance that it will have been rigged, which is why he always carries a pen with him. I can imagine circumstances. I hold most politicians in quite low regard. This won't come as a massive surprise to people kind enough to listen to what I say on a regular basis. I hold most politicians in quite a low regard. It's becoming professionally a little bit compromising, in fact, to state so often how little respect and regard I have for so many of them, because, you know, you do occasionally want to interview some of them. And it would not be difficult for me to believe in establishment, for using that increasingly ridiculous word, cover-ups in the context of child sex abuse, for example. But that would not involve many people, you see. That would involve an allegation being brought to one or two people, and then the dark forces moving in to close down that allegation and possibly to close down that alleger. It's manageable, it's feasible, it is comprehensible and credible that people working together can achieve something. The number of people you would need to be working together in sworn secrecy forever to undertake any sort of rigging on the referendum is too enormous to contemplate. But of course that doesn't stop people like James believing that the Twin Towers were blown up by American operatives. My point is this: wanting to have faith in your democracy is surely the first foundation stone of having a democracy in which you can have faith. I want to believe that my vote counts, and history suggests that it does. Sometimes I voted for the winning side, sometimes I voted for the losing side. That suggests that my vote counts. If every time you end up on the losing side you shout fix or conspiracy, you undermine the central principles of democracy, which is your prerogative. We live in a free country. You think I'm exaggerating about the possibilities of cover-ups? Look at Hillsborough. That needed quite a lot of people to conspire to keep the truth away from the public for decades. But nowhere near as many as you'd need for something like this. So you almost seem to me to be desirous of a society in which our current democratic system has been rejected and replaced with something that only gives the results you want. That's the opposite of democracy. That's a totalitarian state. 12:42 is the time. Dan is in Bristol. Dan, what would you like to say?
Hello, mate. Yeah, basically, I'm just calling. What I want to say for starters, you keep making the point that if leavers. Hang on, I'm getting a bit nervous here.
It's all right, mate. You take your time, Dan. You've got all the time in the world, my friend.
Okay. So for starters, you're suggesting that if you believe one conspiracy theory, then you believe all of them.
No.
Well, you have mentioned. You did say that, though. You did say that.
I just mentioned the ones I did, like Hillsborough and child sex abuse in Parliament. These are things I find completely credible.
Yeah. Earlier in the show, though, you were saying that 46 people seem to believe that the world's flat. That's not the case, at all. That would be like saying that if I...
No, but it was, Dan. You misunderstood me.
Okay.
It was Galileo Galilei got sent to the Spanish Inquisition for proving, not just claiming, that the Earth revolves around the sun and not the other way around. And a significant proportion of the world did believe the Earth was flat for most of humanity's history. The reason I use those examples was that it's very easy to find examples in history of people believing something that's complete bunkum, like the idea of the referendum being rigged.
Yeah. Okay. So also the other point I want to make is around. So you're saying that leave. Someone who may vote to leave, may think that it is rigged, but then if it goes in their favour and we do leave, then they'll say, "Oh no, it wasn't rigged. That proves that everything's great."
No. I'm confused as to how they'll react to a leave vote if they're currently convinced that it will be rigged in the other direction. So what rationale would they have? They'd have to either change their mind or come up with a new theory.
Yeah. Because the thing is, to me, it seems obvious that the only people who possibly could think it was, who possibly could rig it, would be, say, the top men, the Prime Minister, for example.
How would he rig your vote, do you think?
Well, I don't know. I'm not saying that he would, but what I'm saying is surely the only way, if it was ever possible to rig it, that it would go, to rig it, would be to Remain, because, he's the top man, isn't he? So he's surely the top government are the only people who possibly could rig it, right? So
no, not right at all. Nobody could rig it.
Right, okay, well, hopefully that's the case, and I
that
really
is the
feel it,
case.
so. Right, okay, well, that's brilliant then, but, there's no...
Why have you rung me? I'm glad you have. I don't want to sound ungrateful. You sound like a top lad, but
but just because I kind of felt that, you kept making points that I kind of felt were wrong, but obviously perhaps I misunderstood you on the first one, but, I hope you're right about saying that no one could rig it, but in my mind, and I'm sure... the 46% of people who said that they think it might be rigged, I'm sure they're saying that
they think it's probably true that it is rigged.
Well, yeah, and I'm sure obviously it's a separate question, but I'm sure that they think that it would be Cameron and the people who want to remain, that they would rig it in that way, because they're surely the only people who could in any way conceivably get it done, right? They're the only people that could rig it, and they want to remain. No one.
You could get the Freemasons could get involved. Anybody, the reptiles could get involved. The lizard people could get. Anybody could get involved.
Right. This is my point. You're people who you're making it sound silly now.
It is silly. It is silly, Dan.
Right. Well,
actually, silly's far too mild a word. It's absolutely pant-wettingly stupid.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
To be honest, yeah, I hope that it isn't rigged.
Okay.
And to be honest, I wasn't sure, but now hearing the people come on and say they have been the people there observing it and all that, that kind of puts my mind at rest a little bit. Hopefully I can vote and feel like like you say, my vote does count. But
I do. I know, and I hope I provided a little bit of clarity. I think I understand your concerns, but here's the deal. Find someone who knows, and actually find your own favourite politicians. Ask them how it works on the day, and don't let them wriggle out of it, Dan. Don't let them go, well, of course, it's perfectly possible. I couldn't possibly, I certainly find it suspicious, and poor me, victim. Actually push them on it. So do your party machine watch the vote? Do you send representatives, whatever party you belong to? Do you have people ensuring the vote is free and the vote is fair? And Dan, if they say no to you, they are lying to you. Again. Well, we're nearly there. It's 10 to 1. And I guess one thing we can say is there are plenty of people out there who believes if the vote doesn't go their way, it will be proof that it has been rigged. And that's beautiful. It's absolutely watertight. If it goes the way you want, you're happy. If it goes the way you don't want, it's rigged. So there's just no possibility that you're wrong, or that your view is unpopular. And that is the opposite, for the billionth time, that's the opposite of democracy. And quite a few of you are walking that tightrope I've described a few times today, between being amused and being frightened. Polish builder Andy, he describes himself as. I've been here nearly 20 years. I've never applied for British citizenship, as I genuinely felt I didn't need to. Always been doing the best I can to integrate, never claim benefit, and now I really feel like I've been cheated. I've got 2 children who were born here, and I'm not looking forward to Thursday. As you said, real people with real minds will vote, and while it's been funny listening today, it's been quite scary at the same time. Seems to me the whole world is slowly going towards the sort of nationalistic mood, and history shows it does not end well, if you know what I mean. Sorry for the long text, and thank you again. Well, thank you, Andy. Jane is in Coulston. Jane, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi.
Hello,
I just
Jane.
thought it would be nice to have a woman's voice today. I've heard nothing but men.
No, that's not true. We had Catherine, who blamed the Freemasons, and Anna, who thinks it's going to be electronic voting and that our system is corrupt.
Oh, well, obviously I've only been listening when the men have been on.
Go on. What would you like to say as a woman, Jane?
I would like to say that we're going to come down to earth now, and I believe we've got one of the best democracies in the world. I do not believe for 1 minute that it's going to be rigged, and I'm going to vote quite happily, knowing that what I say will, not what I will say will happen, but that it will be taken into account.
Which is what democracy means.
Exactly.
What have you heard today? I know you haven't heard the women, but I mean, people are sort of walking a line, as I just described, between being genuinely frightened by the idea of so many people holding a view that they find so odd and potentially dangerous, amusing or frightening, I suppose, is what I'm asking you.
I suppose I find it a little frightening in that, there are people in this world that still don't believe in evolution, and I just can't believe that is the case. But
Oh, don't say that. No, my phones are going to go. They've already melted one switchboard. Now we're going to have another with people ringing in to discuss. How dare you say that evolution is not true? It's just a theory. All this sort of thing. It's more than that, though. This is almost an assault upon democracy. Almost an assault upon everything we're supposed to hold dear. If you are encouraging people to reject the system rather than the result, you can object to a result, but to reject a system, that is a baby step towards totalitarianism.
Oh, it certainly is, yes. And hopefully I don't think it'll ever get there. You know, I mean, I believe in staying in. I'm going to vote to stay in because I think we'll be better off in Europe. But I know there are quite a few people who've been scared into thinking that we're better off in. Out.
Shake it all about. Do the hokey cokey and you turn around. And that's what it's all about. Hey! Sorry, Jane, I've had a long morning. I'm very glad you rang in. You're right, I did need to hear a female voice.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking my call.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Cheerio. Charlie's in East Grinstead. Charlie, what have you got?
Hello, I'm Charlie.
Yeah. Hi.
I'd say it's not rigged. I mean, I've been to these counts, and as a UKIP member and a Leave voter, I've been to the counts, and it's clear they're not rigged.
Why does 64% of your party think it is?
Well, that may be true, but that's because they're not party members. If you're a party members, you go to these boring events.
Well, why aren't you reassuring the voters that it's not rigged?
I have tried. I've tried with my mother and father, who believe that it will be rigged. The only way.
How did you get on?
Pardon?
How did you get on?
Yeah, on virtually every issue, our trade policy.
No, I mean, have you persuaded your mum and dad that it's not going to be rigged?
Yeah, they say it's going to be rigged, and I say no, it won't be rigged. I've been at account, and my mother's been at account, and she still denies it.
So you haven't managed to persuade your own parents?
No, despite the fact she's been at account.
All right.
But I'd say if there was going to be any corruption, the government wouldn't be stupid enough to do it on the day with so many people about, as you said. They would do it like they have done in this referendum to a certain extent by extending the voting day, which has allowed 480,000 people to register who are mainly Remain voters.
How do you know that?
Well, the website, they published the figures. How many people...
How do you know how those people are going to vote?
Well, it's most likely they're going to be Remain voters, because younger people are the type of people, and I know because I am a young person, to leave it to the last minute. Unlike...
But you're a Leave voter. You can't use yourself as an example.
Well, I mix with a lot of Remain
and just when we're on the subject of democracy, why would you prefer a system that had, or a vote on Thursday to which these 480,000 citizens hadn't been able to have a say?
Because I think the media storm generated around the voting being continued has been to the advantage of the Remain campaign.
Yes, but why don't you want those people to have a vote? That's what intrigues me.
I want those people to have a vote, but I want...
Well, what are you moaning about then?
I want it to be within the limit, and I don't want the government to use the breakdown in the computer system to their advantage. What they should...
But it's only you that's saying it's to their advantage, and you said, I'm a young person and I'm voting Leave. I mean, the figures support the idea that more young people... You're not representative of your own generation.
Young people are overwhelmingly pro-EU, and the government has used the breakdown of the computer system.
So what should they have done instead, then?
Well, they should have opened it for the 2 hours which it was down at the same time the next day, and that way it would have been most fair.
Now, how would they have told everyone that that's what was happening?
Well, I'm sure on the news they could have made a brief mention of it.
But I'm at work, I might not have seen the news. Surely you want the window. Surely. We did this at the time, Charlie, and I came away, I'm afraid, persuaded that people like you have a problem with democracy.
I don't have a problem with it.
So why don't you want as many... I would have liked to have kept it open until the last possible moment. As many people as possible. The more votes, the bigger the mandate. What is the problem with that logic?
I would agree with that, but the government...
But you're not agreeing with it.
The government...
You're saying the opposite.
No, I am... Look, of course the mandate should be the biggest, but the fact is...
But just not with those 480,000.
They used it to their advantage to register as many Remain voters...
And as many Leave voters.
No, they didn't register as many Leave voters. They were...
I think it was impossible to know how people registering intend to vote, unless you've got some information that would prove we've got a conspiracy going underway.
Are you denying that young people are primarily the ones that registered in that 2-day period?
I have absolutely no idea.
What? Common sense would take that it was mainly young people.
Why?
You aren't going to get young people...
I'm 44. I'm incredibly bad at doing things on time. I'm the Douglas Adams school of deadlines. I love the sound they make as they whoosh by. But the central point remains, you're objecting to people having a vote.
I am objecting to
people having a vote.
No, what? In this
480,000 people, and you're objecting to them having a vote, and you phone me up to talk about democracy.
Okay, yes, because the voting time was extended, which it shouldn't have been. I mean, under your logic, we'd extend it all the way up to June the 23rd. That's just to be practical.
No, I know it is. That's why we're not doing it. It was my ideal world scenario.
For 2 days, the government
because they could. It was practical.
Voting date to their advantage.
Yeah, so Charlie doesn't want 480,000 people to have a vote because, under your own admission, I don't want to misrepresent you, you think they're going to vote the way you don't want. That's why. If you think they were all going to vote your way, you'd be all in favour of it.
But it's still...
Let me show you what impartiality sounds like. I don't know. Let me show you what impartiality sounds like, okay? I have no idea how this person is going to vote, but I passionately hope that they do. Can I do anything at all to ensure that that becomes more likely? Yes, I can. I can encourage them to register. I can make it easy for them to register. I can make it possible for them to register. A 2-hour glitch? Is there any way I can absolutely reflect that completely in the response? No, there isn't. You can't say we'd do it for 2 hours at the same time the next day because it would have gone down again, you prune. It was the sheer weight of numbers that caused the collapse. So they had to do it in a way that would allow the system to stay upright. But remember, you don't know, Charlie, how anybody intended to vote. You phoned a radio station to say that you don't think 480,000 people should have been able to. And that really is another death knell for proper democracy. That's it from me for another day. You've been listening to James O'Brien on LBC. The next voice you will hear belongs to Sheila Fogarty.